Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and welcome to Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends. I'm Wayne Tuttle. I'm again your host. See, when you like, it's so much nicer for the other channels. They pop different guys in and out, right? But here I am once again. Please go down, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you see when our videos come out, even though it's every Monday and Friday anymore. Go down to our About section. Go down, scroll on that thing where it says videos and this and that and playlists. Very end, you'll see About section. Represent.com, long sleeve, short sleeve, gray, black, Dutch Hunter Rendezvous and Legends Superstition Mountain t-shirts. We have more merchandise and swag coming up, which will probably be most likely rather than online available at the Rendezvous or here locally. So, but we'll kind of introduce that in the next few weeks here, kind of what we're looking at, kind of give people a few things they've been asking for. That being said and done, today we do a story that I went out and I did research, but I also did research, and I did research. And recently, this last Friday on Live, someone asked me about it. And it's a story and something I've touched upon several times. Sometimes I don't want to do a story because it's not necessarily a Lost Dutchman story. And in short order, I try to explain it's not necessarily because of the research that's been done. It's found in error it was attached to the Lost Dutchman or the Superstition Mountains. But people continually ask, and I said, well, I should probably do a Chasing Legends on that. So part of that research was looking at other channels, YouTube and so forth, that people do things, and then realize it's one of those things that just continues to flow, and people continue to reference because they find it in so many articles and so many different books. And it's definitely a case of a story's told, and when it has its chance to be corrected rather than be corrected, it continues on and grows and grows and grows. What I'm talking about is the Doc Thorne and the Lost Dutchman Mine story. Now, the story you've heard is there's a guy named Doc Thorne. He's attached to Fort McDowell. He's part of the Army. He's an Army surgeon. They're out skirmish or something. He's captured by the Apache. There's a chief, his son's very ill or something wrong with him. Sometimes it's a broken arm, sometimes it's someone very important. Anyways, he has his medicines. He tells him, get me my medicine bag. He treats him, he's healed, and then the next 6 to 8 years he stays with the Apaches. Well, what happens eventually at one point is they're trading gold. Now, what's important to note here in the story, in any version of the story, is the Apaches have found gold from these old mines, these old probably Spanish or Mexican mines, and they're trading it for ammunition and food and stuff, which tells you the very people fighting and trying to eliminate the Apaches are trading with them for the very things that were sustaining this ongoing war effort. If people weren't greedy, then that would have hurt the Apache cause very much. But so be it. He points out, where are you getting this gold? Where is it happening? So finally one time they blindfold him and take him out to show him the source. The original story that you've all heard is they go out, they take the blindfold off, there's a pile of lode mine gold there. And some versions he says it's spread all over the place. There's a couple tons. In another version of the story, there's just a small pile of it. He packs up what he can. They tell him he'll never be able to return there again. They blindfold him again, he leaves. At one point they're getting a drink, the blindfold slips, he sees what he says is Sombrero Peak Weaver's Needle in the distance. He could always locate that spot where he was at. And then they move on. Then supposedly cavalry shows up, they get into a skirmish with the Apaches, Thorne is freed up. Thorne goes off with the cavalry. Hey, he's finally been released. There's a big to-do. He's been in the Apaches, captive of them for so long. He relocates to supposedly Prescott. In Prescott, he tells people of this gold he's got. He's willing to finance this expeditions. And then all these people in him go back down into the superstitions trying to find this area. Supposedly somewhere between Weaver's Needle and Four Peaks. Quite a distance there. But supposedly they're going back in the mountains and they're looking for this. He uses all the money up. They cannot find it. After all this is said and done, he's done. He's broke. He relocates. I believe at this point he's relocating to New Mexico as a physician. His brother, who's also a physician, who had traveled out here supposedly with him, and we find out that was true at one point, His brother says, I got a bunch of physicians. We put $5,000 together. Why don't you go back out and look for it again? He says, I don't think I can find it. I think it's a waste of time and money. They encourage him to do so. He does it again, spends the $5,000, broke again, end of his life. He never found the mine, never was able to relocate it in the Superstition Mountains. This is a story told by a number of different people. There's a gentleman named Charles Clark that did an article concerning it. The first time you really kind of catch it, even though it was a circulating story, the one that most people catch is, if they're a Dutch hunter, is in the bark notes. Jim Bark talks about it. He kind of tells that version of the story to some degree. And then he talks that one of the ranchers in the area, John Hewitt, had been part of one of these expeditions or knew Thorne or had met Thorne, and asked if Hewitt would write to Thorne and see if he'd be interested in coming out and search for it. At the time, they say Thorne is around 80 years old, so this would put it pre-1900. So Hewitt gets a hold of Thorne. Thorne says, I'm 80. I could never find it. I don't know the location. I'm the wrong guy for all this. I'm sorry, but yeah, I just want to, basically, he says, I just want to live out the last of my years and my life. Sorry, guys, I'm not into this. So later, Sims Ely takes this story, and the story's got some legs. There's been some newspaper articles, like I said, Charles Clark and some people talking about the Doc Thorne Mine. And Sims Ely goes to write about it, and Sims Ely actually did a lot of research with Jim Bark's information, trying to search up information on Doc Thorne in the 1940s. And even writes letters asking about Thorne's military service and a number of different things. The response is there was no Doc Thorne, did not, as a contractor or in the Army, he did not serve. So Ely writes to the family and gets a lot of family records, checks census records, and gets kind of a buildup of who Doc Thorne was. At this point, Sims Ely's kind of realizing the story's not what you think it is, because he can tell where this gentleman is, where he searched, and so forth. The unfortunate aspect is as they go to write the Lost Dutchman Mine, the man known as Wiley, who was the editor, he edited and ghost wrote a lot of the manuscript. Well, what he did was he took those stories and he embellished upon them, and where Ely had done a bunch of research, he didn't correct things in there, he included stories. So we have the Bark notes, the manuscript, which has the story, and Jim Bark didn't know any different, because this is what he's told by people, and he was basically writing stories of stuff he knew. He didn't know Doc Thorne. He'd heard of the story, talked to people that supposedly knew Thorne, and then presented the story. Ely went in, did more research, started to change that story with the research he did, but then the writer, the individual that edited his book, leaves that information out. And now we have suddenly the problem of that original story varied a little bit from Jim Bark's. It's presented again. So basically, we have that story and a lot of origination, and hopefully there's not a lot of glare on this. The Bark notes, no, you cannot have this copy of this, because that's my copy, and it's a very special copy. And it's out there. And then it goes into The Lost Dutchman Mine by Sims Ely. No dust cover on this. The dust cover is actually put away. It was a little bad shape, and I made sure I preserved it and put it away, because I do like to reference this book and take it out. I didn't want to ruin the book. The next, and through a number of publications over the years, that story's told. And then it's told again in The Lost Dutchman Mine of Jacob Waltz, The Golden Dream by Thomas Glover. Good friend. He refers to many of us always as colleagues, and I really think that's pretty honorable of him, because I don't know if I'm a colleague. I'm just a guy that does Dutch hunter research. He further pushes this tale and adds to it and talks about it in Treasure Tales of the Superstition Mountains, Clues, Maps, Twice Told Tales, T.E. Glover. He seems to have lost his Ph.D. between the first book and the second book. He still has his Ph.D. because he got a doctorate in England. Anyways, I believe it was at the University of London. So all kinds of little neat notes and twists. So the publications, Thomas Glover really turned this thing around. Obviously, these two books, this was the most recent published by him, an excellent book. You can still probably get it and find it, definitely at the museums and so forth. I'm sure you can find it on Amazon and stuff, but it's an excellent book. There were some problems in the publishing of it, and he wasn't very happy with it, but it's still well done. I remember when Thomas and I met at the museum one day, just by happenstance, which is a word he would use, and he was standing there and he was showing me photographs and asking, we all got a kind of a say-so and a vote on the covers and so forth. And this was one of the covers that he was offering up, basically like this. And I remember he showed me this. I don't remember if this is the one I picked, but there was 2 or 3 photos he had of and the colors, and he was talking about it with me over it, which I felt very privileged actually that he would consider asking me the question and allowing me to have my input. Side note. Anyhow, so those books came out and I read those books, and then I further kind of pushed in research on that. People continue to do lectures on the Doc Thorne Mine. There are people that do videos on the Doc Thorne Mine. There are people that continue to make references because of P.C. Bicknell and a lot of people that referenced the Doc Thorne Mine. The odd thing is, Doc Thorne did interviews after he was released by the Apaches, because he was captured by the Apaches. He was not an Army doctor. He was not a contractor for the Army. He traveled to San Francisco on a boat with his brother, and he came to the gold rush. And what happened was, in the California gold rush, he got there and decided, this ain't for me. So while everybody else is traveling west, Doc Thorne, out of Marysville, California, decides to head back east because this isn't for me. I'm done with this stuff. Well, he wasn't quite done yet, because as they're traveling through and they got in, I think, the area of Gila Bend, they're attacked by the Apaches. Everyone in their little wagon train, the group, they had an ambulance and a number of things with medical supplies. Obviously, he's a doctor. Was attacked. Him and one other man, gentleman, I think name was Brown, but I don't know what happened to Brown. They're the only survivors of this, and they're captured. So he's taken in, and this is the story he tells. Now remember, Doc Thorne did interviews. This is his version of this story. So Doc Thorne's captured, and there was an Apache that had a gangrene leg that needed amputated. And he explained this to the Apaches because he spoke Spanish, and he was able, through Spanish and translate, he was able to make them understand. On the ambulance, there's medical supplies, anesthesia and stuff, that I can do this and he can survive, but this is what I need to do. They okayed it, got him the supplies he needed, he did the surgery, the person recovered. And they just, I don't know if this was the chief's son or anything, it never says any reference to that. It must have been just amazing to them that this guy went through the surgery, never woke up, never screamed, cried. He recovered, everything went well. For the next 6 to 8 years, Thorne is with the Apaches. He says he was treated very well. As long as he did not try to escape or anything, he was allowed freely to kind of travel about and stuff. Over time, one of the truths of the story is he noticed they were trading for ammunition and stuff for gold. So he kind of was like, hey, where are you guys getting this? And they kind of like, oh, okay, well, we'll let you. So they went down in this area, and it's in a stream bed. And it's like a wash, and very rocky wash. And there was a lot of free gold supposedly in this wash. He saw it, commented on it. One of the Apaches said something, you know, of its value. And he said, he tried to tell them, it's not valuable, don't worry about it, because he wanted to know the location. Little greed in his heart. And the Apaches told him basically, you're full of shit. We know this is the stuff you guys like because we trade with it. So anyways, I don't know if he grabbed any samples or anything. But they leave from there. He tries to remember everything about the area and stuff, and so he could relocate this wash somewhere. Basically, after this, they're one day in a meet up with the Navajo, and the Navajo and the Apaches do a peace treaty, and it's something over. The Navajos bring like 800 sheep, and the Apaches bring a bunch of women that they had captured from the Navajo, and they make a trade, and then they have a big party. Well, of course, they all start drinking, mezcal and so forth, and then they decide to fight again. And the Navajo basically kick the Apaches' ass. They take the women back, they take the sheep back, and Dr. Thorne, in the midst of all this, just walks across to the Navajo side and leaves with them. The Navajo don't care about he's a captured prisoner or any of this stuff, so basically once he goes off with the Navajo, they wish him well and he just takes off and leaves. And then he goes to tell his story. Tries to get a couple expeditions together to go back into this area where he had been. And it's believed it could be in the White Mountains along the New Mexico-Arizona border or somewhere around there. And he took several expeditions. They couldn't find anything. He couldn't relocate where this wash was and all this. That's the Doc Thorne story. Why do we know this? In 1876, a gentleman interviews Doc Thorne, and the story's released. There was another interview released in 1890. There was an interview released in 1903. Doc Thorne tells this story, that he was captured. He never got any physical gold that he left with. He saw this stuff. It appears to be placer gold through all this area. It was not lode mine gold. So the story's completely different. And you're wondering, how does this story, he becomes this medical surgeon, all this stuff, get attached? Well, there's a man named, I believe his name was Baston or something, and Baston or Baster or whatever his name is, was in the area of Arizona. And in his story, there was gold he found. He had been captured by the Apaches and was released, and the whole thing happened. And it's very similar, but it happens in the Four Peaks area. What's believed is that story trickled in with the Doc Thorne story. And people who heard both, kind of Clark and other people, put them together. And Jim Bark was not in error. He just was hearing what that kind of melding of these two stories were. So basically, you have two different stories, two different individuals. One's actually attached to the military, one is not. And basically, they get melded together. Jim Bark reports on what he knows, basically when he's writing the manuscript, probably in the late 19-teens and then early 1920s, as he's putting his material together in notes. Sims Ely goes and researches it, finds out that, hey, hold it, there's problems with the Doc Thorne story and all this stuff. He gathers the information that changes that narrative, but the individual Wiley, who's writing Lost Dutchman Mine, taking basically Ely's manuscript, refining it and editing it for publication, decides, no, this Doc Thorne story is good, and we're going to ignore all this and put it out. And everyone afterwards follows. So the real Doc Thorne story is not only known since 1890 or 1903 or 1940s, it's been known for a long time, but people have a tendency to ignore the obvious. There's still people that will do videos. There are people that will quote in books about, this must be the area of the Lost Dutchman Mine because it's the same area that P.C. Bicknell searched for the Lost Doc Thorne Mine. Lost Doc Thorne Mine couldn't have possibly been there because Doc Thorne was never in the Superstition Mountains. The mine was never there. He never claimed it was. And you can actually go through the old newspapers and find the interviews of what Doc Thorne says. Doc Thorne passes away. He's, as a retired physician. He never said any of these tall tales. His version is, yes, I was captured by the Apaches. I saw this area where there was all this placer gold. I believe this. Now, Clark and another writer, I think his name is Basta. Anyways, these two writers both went searching for the Lost Doc Thorne Mine, but somewhat corrected in their views. When they went to the areas where they felt it was, they found stream beds that were loaded with pyrite. And they believe what he saw on the ground was this pyrite, quartz and pyrite running through the water, and with the sunlight and everything, he thought it was tons of gold, which it actually wasn't. So that could be the truth. I don't know those exact locations, and I don't know if anybody knows or if Clark's notes or anything gives specific directions to that. So I wanted to correct that because I get a lot of questions and a lot of people bring up Doc Thorne Mine. It's something that, as a Dutch hunter, I've placed out of my mind to some degree because I realize it's not relevant to actual search. So if I'm quoting or that, now if I wrote a book, I would write a book concerning a number of stories that do not belong in the canon of the Lost Dutchman Mine and explain it like that, which Dr. Glover did, which was an excellent thing because you need to do that to cleanse people of it. The problem is nobody seems to have purchased these books and read them, and then books since then continue to just propel this along. Doc Thorne Mine, not in the Superstitions. It's not the Lost Dutchman Mine. It's not the Two Soldiers Mine. It has no relevance. Even Doc Thorne himself tells you basically it's not. He didn't know nothing about the lost mine. What he talks about is, I got no gold. I could not find my way back to this place. And he basically, from all traces, it appears it's somewhere in the White Mountain area along the New Mexico-Arizona border. So, and I've heard that for so many years. The last 20 years, I've heard a lot of that information concerning that. Unfortunately, like I said, you can find this book. I know there's a book out there. I don't know if it's still actively published. Thomas, if you ever watch one of these, you really should, because it's a good book. It's a good read. It's a hard read for a lot of people. What it is it's the Golden Dream, and he expanded. He took further research in a number of the chapters from the Golden Dream. One thing he did that was important, there was a lot of misinformation and things given to him that didn't need to be continually pushed forward. So he eliminated a lot of that, and this book was an excellent book. It deserved every bit of the enthusiasm that this book did, but because of things beyond his control, nothing wrong that anything Thomas did wrong, it kind of put a little bit of stain on things. Similarly to what happened with Helen Corbin's Bible of the Lost Dutchman. Unfortunately, sometimes we go to do research and stuff and people pull the wool over our eyes, and that's very unfortunate. And then what happens is it literally can just change the direction or the ability. You know, you can't take that book back and completely restructure it and rewrite it. Actually, Jesse did. I'm sorry, Jesse. Now, that wasn't meant as a dig, Jesse. But Jesse did, and rightfully so. He was unhappy with something, not for those reasons. He was unhappy the way I think he had it laid out and the way it explained itself. There was something he wanted to make it right, and that's Jesse, how he personally felt. And it wasn't that he wrote a bad book. It's he felt he could write a better book, and he renamed it, put it back out, and much better job. Yes, much easier to follow book. Chronologically, it works so much better. I think he did a tremendous job. So, but in Thomas's case, this is kind of an expansion on the other book. Really nice job. Helen's book, the unfortunate aspect is we lost, I believe it was the Jacob Waltz, the two soldiers, Joe Deering, Adolph Ruth, a lot of the bark note manuscript information that she had included in her book, we lost that because that book was pulled from the shelves by former State Attorney General Robert Corbin. And maybe someday I'll sit with him and we'll talk about that. Maybe we won't. I'm always told, don't bring that stuff up with Bob. But Bob's a good guy, and sometimes you have a right to be upset about something. So there it is. I know that's disappointing to people. There's a lot of people that believe in the Doc Thorne, think it's the earliest Dutchman story. They really, but it wasn't any fault to some of the early authors. They were just taking information they were given. And then as they started to do research, like I did, Sims Ely in the 40s already was tearing this thing apart. And then unfortunately his editor just put all the fabrication stuff back together and published it. I don't know if Sims Ely got to see the final proof or anything, or he read the book or was disappointed or any of his thoughts or views. Thomas might actually know that. So, and I'm going to sit down sometime and look at the letters and look at the stuff at the very end when that book's being published and the end of that time to see what the word was and what was going on with that. Obviously, Jim Bark was long gone by then Sims Ely is. So basically that core group that you would have been able to hear kind of their critique of how that information was used were gone. I still stand by much of the Bark notes because Jim Bark was compiling what he knew. And with Jim Bark, if he's there in place and you find a date and a name, you can find that person and where they lived, and you can work a census records. It matches and works very, very well. Not to take anything away from a number of people who have told these stories and will continue to tell them. They're getting it wrong. I've always said that, there are people that said, oh, we're doing a video channel, we're going to tell you the truth. This is where the truth lies. There's absolutely no bullshit here. When research or something goes away and it's disappointing even to me, like, oh, wow, that kind of knocked my theories out of the water, I'm still going to be honest about it because why are you chasing down the wrong rabbit hole? I mean, at that point, it's ridiculous and you're just wasting your time. Are you there just to piss your money down a hole and just misadventure yourself? No, you want to do the right thing. So the Doc Thorne Mine, take it. And while it's a great story, the real story is very interesting and standalone to itself. It has nothing to do with Superstition Mountains, nothing to do with the Lost Dutchman Mine. It's a very good story. Look up those interviews, maybe possibly. If we ever get the website up, maybe I'll find those original 2 interviews and put those Doc Thorne interviews where they talk to him himself and have those posted up so people can actually read the man's words, what he said himself. Because that actually kind of puts it in place. And the fact that the man's story is very different than the one that was published in books is just very odd. But we see how that happens. Two stories that crisscross, and that's exactly what happened. So there's the Doc Thorne story. I hope everybody really enjoyed that. There's probably a few people that went, bummer. I'm sorry about that. Don't kill the messenger. I mean, I'm just spreading the message of the truth. And, you know, maybe sometime I get, there's a tendency where I got to pull back because there's a lot of times people talk about things and stories that are shared with you, and I know the truth behind them. And this one is not harming anybody. A lot of times what people say is they're storytellers or so forth. I don't think they mean any harm in it. It shows me sometimes with a number of people the lack of actual really good research they do. There are people that are not Dutch hunters that portray themselves as, and that's unfortunate, because if you are a real Dutch hunter and you put in real-time research, you would have known this years ago. So that's why I'm dismissive of that story, and generally I just can't pop off and answer a lot of questions on it. I had to go back, reference a couple of the books, and make sure the sources where I got it. Again, I always quote my sources because I always want the people to get credit who did a lot of the turning the earth, original earth work, and Thomas Glover did. And I will always double and back check Thomas or anybody else to make sure, did they get it right? And I did, and I looked at it and looked at what he had. The Sims Ely collection, I believe, is at the Hayden Library at ASU. So you can go through, if you want to go through boxes and boxes of stuff. A lot of that information is in there where you would be able to find what Sims Ely uncovered. Even today with Ancestry and a lot of things, you can actually go through old newspapers and you will be able to, again, pull and turn this stuff. So there it is. That was one off that checklist of things people have asked me to address and do. Trevor has his own wish list. He's learning as he does these things. Everybody always acts like Trevor is like, God, at his age and when he's grown up around Clay Wurst and Tom Collenborn and all these people and Bob Shoes and stuff and everything he's heard sitting around those well, a lot of times early on those campfires, he was asleep, okay? He would just fall asleep, or he was saying things like, can we go to bed now? But yeah, he wasn't long past 9, 10 o'clock, and we were up till 1, 2 in the morning. But Trevor's learning probably more through this stuff, listening to me and asking me a question. Can you do a story on this? Because he didn't pay attention when he was younger. He got to go on trips about things. He just doesn't remember what the trip was necessarily about. There you go. The Doc Thorne story. Obviously, the title of this one is The Real Doc Thorne Story, or The Truth of Doc Thorne, or something along those lines. Trevor already gets it because that's what he's going to text me in a half hour or so. Is like, what's the title of it? And then I got to come up with the title. You realize after 200 and some close to 50 of these and the 36 episodes we did and all, Trevor comes up and goes, what's the title of it? It's like well over 300 things I've had to come up with titles. Literally, I want to call it, well, call this one 232, because literally I got to try to come up with something catchy and stuff. And just to make that point, at one point we started doing things, and we put Easter eggs all over our videos in different ways and possibilities. And Trevor and I, to this day, are so amused that no one's figured out the Easter eggs. There is something really cool out there that somebody could find, and I am still, to this day, and Frank doesn't even know. I've given a little of it to him, but I've even told other guys that they're there and kind of led them, give them a breadcrumb trail, and they cannot figure it out. So I understand when people say something like, well, Bob Ward got really frustrated because he gave people breadcrumbs and they still couldn't figure the crap out. And then I realized I'm dealing with treasure hunters, some of them with PhDs, college degrees, all these different things. And then they watch this stuff and they still can't figure something out that I just came up and sitting on the couch going, hey, by the way, let's do this. And then I sketch it out and we went with it. And people, when we dropped stuff, people never caught on to it. So someday maybe we'll have that. You know, I'm old, decrepit, and I'll just reveal it while we're all on death's doorstep. I'm like, guys, this is what I was trying to tell you, point out to you. How come nobody picked up on that? And it is hilarious. Trevor, I think, is still amused by it. He's the only other person besides me that knows what we did, and no one's ever caught on to it. And it's just kind of mind-blowing that no one ever called us on it. And it's nothing that we did wrong or bad. It was we put breadcrumbs out there for people, and everybody just stepped on the breadcrumbs and went on their merry way. So, but thank you for watching, you know. Thank you again for everything, attending the live. The live went really great this last week. I don't know if we'll be doing something with the mapping or the live this Friday. It will be at 4 o'clock, either or. So you will catch us there. So go back down, okay? Definitely hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, leave comment if you got a comment. We always kind of make sure we reference the comments. We like them, we answer them. If you got a good question, you got a bad question, you got a dumb question, if you got a trolling question, we will try to answer most questions if there's a way we can feel we can answer it. There's only so many times, you know, when you guys are telling us great job and stuff, I'll always try to say thank you, but that does kind of get old. So the thumbs up, I think, kind of takes care of that. But I always try to interact and do that. We like doing the live for the very same reason of trying to tell some stories, mix some things in, answer some questions. Plus, it tells us what you guys are interested in that we can work on in the future and develop and work out here. So hope everybody enjoyed this week. Hope everybody's having a great weekend, because it is the weekend, but this is what I do on weekends. I shoot stupid videos. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not a stupid video. It's a very important video for historical research. But I like to clarify, I like to find the truth, and there we go. So until the next time, until you see me Friday, whether it's live or Memorex. Does anybody remember those commercials? Trevor has no idea what I'm talking. He knows, you know what Memorex even is? It's a tape. It was tape. It was like they play an audio tape. Was it a live singer or was it actually tape recording? Because it was such good quality tape. Analog. You know what analog? Yeah. Okay. So anyways, whether it's me live or Memorex or in the studio or however you want to put it, we will see you again on Friday. Thank you for joining. Remember always, I'm Wayne Tuttle. You're not, and this was Chasing Legends.